This week on Morning Mika, waltzing down the campaign trail.
I set out to find a partner who can help build this brighter future. So, Pennsylvania, I'm here today because I found such a leader. Governor Tim Walz of the great state of Minnesota.
Thank you, Madam Vice President, for the trust you put in me, but maybe more so, thank you for bringing back the joy. In Minnesota, we respect our neighbors and their personal choices that they make. Even if we wouldn't make the same choice for ourselves, there's a golden rule. Mind your own damn business. You know it, you feel it. These guys are creepy and, yes, just weird as hell. That's what you see. That's what you see. So we got 91 days. My God, that's easy. She believes in the promise of America. We just got to fight. We just got to fight. Because as soon-to-be President Harris says, when we fight, we win.
Kamala Harris and Tim Walz made their debut as a team in a joyful, exuberant rally in a packed auditorium this week. They laid the groundwork for what will be an aggressive yet super optimistic 3 months to Election Day. I want to bring in the Morning Mika co-hosts Symone Sanders Townsend, Huma Abedin, and Jen Psaki. I want to get your take on this team and this sort of campaign reset for Kamala Harris. And Huma, by the way, we should add that Kamala Harris was on the very first 50 over 50 list. And isn't it kind of delicious? She's on the cover of Forbes 4 years ago as an honoree for 50 over 50. And now she's seen as sort of the young, fresh face in presidential politics. It's all part of the joy factor, isn't it?
It is so much a part of the joy factor. And Mika, you always say our runway is long. And so the fact that well over 50, she's running for president just adds to that joy and that excitement. When you look at the last 6 of our 8 presidential elections, if I'm correct, was either a Bush or a Clinton on the ticket, just that you have a new face out in the world. I mean, she has an opportunity now to introduce herself to our country. In a way that I think if we didn't, have these long elections, like people in Europe or other countries, they have much shorter election cycles, but it's almost like the sprint is to her benefit because she can really introduce herself to her country, to these huge crowds, to have 15,000 people in Detroit and 12,000 people in Eau Claire. That says something real about people paying attention.
Absolutely. And Jen Psaki, Governor Walz has been called the safe or progressive choice. And I'm curious about whether you think that's an accurate description. Maybe in some ways it is. But also he has coined creepy and weird, mind your own damn business, and made the couch joke. So I'm thinking attack dog should be added to the description. What do you think?
Yeah, look, I think coming from 20 years of working in politics for politicians, the shorthanding descriptions of politicians annoys me a lot. And this is annoying me because this is a guy who won in 2006 in a House race. And I was working at the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee at the time, where there had only been one Democrat who'd represented the district since the 1890s. It's like a conservative rural district. And he's somebody who had an NRA A rating until 2018 or even around then, right around then. My point is that, yes, he's an attack dog. I think he's somebody who's kind of like a common sense politician, common sense governor who talks about issues the way people talk about them. That's who he is. And so I think the shorthanding of him is actually undervaluing him and something Democrats and people supporting the ticket should stop doing.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I had a hard time making the transition from Joe Biden, but then when Kamala Harris stepped onto the stage, I could totally see it, especially when it turned out to be her. When he endorsed her, I felt a lot better. then I was talking with like people high up in the campaign, and they were trying to sort of help me along with Tim Walz. And I'm like, who is this guy? Don't get it. I mean, Josh Shapiro and these people are so qualified. And I don't get, and then he walked out on stage because they kept saying to me, he's folksy. He's really going to connect with people. And I'm thinking, don't tell me someone is folksy. That's going to concern me. That sounds like an act. Oh no, Simone, this guy's so beyond authentic. He is outside of himself, like with joy and with everything that he's about.
Mika, I think the people of Nebraska would like to take credit for just how amazing Governor Walz is, because he is a native Nebraskan like myself. But seriously, I think the folksy or the, he just wait till you get a load of it. I do think that it kind of, I don't like when we put politicians, elected officials in these boxes, if you will. Governor Walz is, as they've said, he's a former teacher, he's a former coach, he's served this country, he's a veteran. He's also a current governor. He's also the chair of the Democratic Governors Association. He's a dad. People are multifaceted. And I think that we should talk about the candidates as they are multifaceted, and the campaigns should talk about their candidates as though they are multifaceted. So I think, frankly, it's refreshing to see someone like Governor Walz get his due. I think he took off on social media and in various circles the way that he did because of his authenticity.
Yeah. In picking Walz, who is a two-term governor and also served a dozen years in Congress, Harris is banking that her number two will win over white working-class voters in Rust Belt states, while also boasting his robust progressive record. Walz has shown he's not afraid to attack Donald Trump and his MAGA agenda. In fact, Walz's use of the word weird to describe Trump and his running mate has gone viral. Here's what he said when he first said it on Morning Joe.
These guys are just weird. And it's, they're running for He-Man Women Haters Club or something. That's what they go at. That's not what people are interested in.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I think it was Joe who was going freaks, weirdos, and insurrectionists. I mean, he's been saying it for a while, like, this is what we're talking about here. Jen, does this strategy work? And what else should the campaign look at in terms of strategies between now and November? Because as we know, Donald Trump and whoever J.D. Vance is, I call him J.V. Vance, because he seems so J.V., compared to everybody else on the stage, the presidential campaign stage. They don't play by the rules.
Yeah, look, and I think that's an important thing to remember. One of the things that I think has really been working for Vice President Harris is that she is just gutsy and bold and makes quick decisions, and she puts herself out there. And that's been working for her so far, and I think it's important she continues that. There's no question she probably will. I do think this works because, Democrats, and, I worked in Democrat politics for a long time, as did Simone and Huma. Sometimes Democrats get a little too fancy in how they talk about things. It becomes academic almost, right? And that does not connect with people. It feels very elite. It feels very coastal. And the reason this works is because this is how people talk about some of the things they're hearing from Trump, whether it's debating whether a shark or electrocution should kill you, or Hannibal Lecter keeps coming up. It is just freaking weird, right? And the key thing of why this works, I think, is also because Governor Walz is not saying every Republican or everybody who's MAGA is weird. He's saying what Donald Trump and J.D. Vance are talking about is weird. It is not connecting with people across the country, no matter your political stripes. And that's a key thing. I do think it's working. Beyond this, I think that one of the messages that we've seen them both talk about, Governor Walz and Vice President Harris, is I'm fighting for you, that guy's fighting for himself. And I think that is a core root message frame that works for basically any issue, whether it's abortion rights or the economy or other issues. And I also love that they've taken back freedom. Governor Shapiro has done this really well. Pete Buttigieg has done this very well, but so has Vice President Harris. Freedom and the defense of freedom and our rights is something that Democrats are fighting for, not the other side.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Also, I see the teacher and the coach all the time out there on stage, because there's a sense of, you know, teachers have clarity about right and wrong because they have to teach it. And so it's important. And so they are leaders in their small countries, schools across America. I think it's an incredible opportunity to remember what leadership is and the difference between right and wrong. It's basic. It's what you would teach your kids. And we lost that with Donald Trump. Donald Trump does things that we would never let our kids, let alone any CEO, do. Anybody who behaved the way Donald Trump has, in like 25 different examples I could give you but won't right now, would be fired from their job or grounded because they're a kid. So here we are with a guy who has just a gut reaction to the difference between right and wrong, and you can see it on his face, in his entire being, and I think he'll make a big difference on that. Before I go to Simone, who worked for Vice President Harris and has a lot of insight, Huma, I'm wondering if you've thought along the way, as you've watched Kamala Harris walk out as a presidential candidate to throngs of people who have stood in line to see her, have you thought about the runway that was paved for her by what we all went through with Hillary Clinton? Because I feel a lot of women are like, oh no, this isn't going to happen to us again. Because Hillary Clinton was attacked in a lot of ways that were really unfair. And I feel like people are smart to it now. There's just perhaps a tiny bit of progress. What do you think?
I think yes. I think she has 100% paved the way for Vice President Harris. I agree with everything Jen just said about this notion that we as Democrats often try to be very academic. And one of the things I think the vice president has done very well is she seems very comfortable on stage. She has the confidence. There's no question about her ability to be commander-in-chief in terms of how she presents herself. And I think, you know, I say this to just women I've spoken to in the last few weeks who've gone from being, you know, a little depressed, as people were when we were dealing with President Biden still being our nominee. And now all of a sudden these women waking up and saying, all right, I have to do something this time. So I say to some women, this in a way is your absolution vote. For those of you who assumed she was going to win, assumed it was going to be easy, assumed, or you just didn't want to engage. It's not easy. And look, she's in an extraordinary honeymoon period right now. I think we all recognize that. All three of us have been in politics a long time. That they're going to come after both Vice President Harris and Governor Walz, just, you know, throwing these attacks about whether he served or chose not to serve in Iraq. They sowed out, and they will do that with her. Donald Trump will do that with her. They're going to take every little opportunity and try and attack her. But I do think, you know, I have to say it's extraordinary. There were women at the end of 2016 who would say, I'm not going to see a woman president in my lifetime. And that is not what it feels like today. A lot has happened. Now, the last thing I'll say, you know, I'm sure you all saw that Pew research that showed that 57% of American women do not think it's important or relevant to elect a woman president. She should be elected because she's the most qualified person to be president of the United States, and just go out there and keep doing what she's doing.
So, Simone, to Huma's point, they're already attacking her. Donald Trump is attacking her in a visceral, personal, ugly way, saying that she decided to be black, She decided to promote that she was black.
She was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black.
I don't have the words, so hopefully you do.
Mika, who is Donald Trump to tell anyone who they are, let alone the current vice president of the United States of America? Like, I think that there is and I have seen a number of people get into the weeds. As soon as Donald Trump attacked the vice president, lobbed this, frankly, what what is a racist notion, but also a notion that is speaking to some undercurrents in some other factions of the electorate that says perhaps she's not Black enough. I think Donald Trump is doing many things at one time, and I saw a number of people in the aftermath of those comments by him say, oh, well, she's a member of a historically Black Greek-lettered organization. She's an AKA. She went to a HBCU. What do you mean? None of that matters. Those organizations and schools are not what makes someone Black. To be very clear, the vice president is who she says she is, and who she has authentically said she is, and the way she's lived her life for her entire being, how her mother raised her and her sister. And so I do think that there's this notion that people want to defend against these attacks against Donald Trump by giving a laundry list of things. But the reality is Donald Trump does not dictate this conversation. Kamala Harris, the vice president, has been very clear about who she is and what she believes, which is why, Mika, I think a debate between the two, Vice President Harris and Donald Trump, may not ever happen, because Donald Trump knows what he is in for when he stands on a stage next to Vice President Harris, a formidable opponent.
Yeah, so Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, the sexist and racist attacks continue. Take a look.
Are you suggesting she was a DEI hire?
100%. She was a DEI hire.
From the standpoint of just who she is and the policies, the positions that she's taken, her failure to do anything in terms of the border, that sort of thing, I think it's just a failure from top to bottom. I think she was a DEI hire, and I think that that's what we're seeing.
We're effectively run in this country via the Democrats, via our corporate oligarchs, by a bunch of childless cat ladies who are miserable at their own lives and the choices that they've made, and so they want to make the rest of the country miserable too. And it's just a basic fact. You look at Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, AOC, the entire future of the Democrats is controlled by people without children. And how does it make any sense that we've turned our country over to people who don't really have a direct stake in it?
I mean, I tried to remind them, guys, on Morning Joe that there's nothing wrong with being a cat lady. My kids are older. Does that make me childless? I want to qualify.
Absolutely not. I've got to say,
this is Blue.
Hello, Blue. I see. I don't even know the cat.
We have like 5 of them.
I have a few. We have Blue. We have Gray. We have Meatball.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
he's fabulous.
Meatball.
This is Carly's. I have a lot of cats. I like to rescue cats. I have a lot of friends with cats, and there's cat ladies for Kamala. They got mad. I would not mess with cat ladies, just FYI. Simone, just really quickly, you worked for Vice President Harris. Her leadership style has been questioned a lot. There were a lot of people concerned about her and what would happen if, Joe Biden decided to, and look what's happened. Sometimes the leadership style needs to fit the moment. And I'm wondering if it's sort of been something that surprised you, or are you not surprised that actually it seems like everything that she brings to the table really meets the moment, even when she's taking on protesters?
If you want Donald Trump to win, then say that, otherwise I'm speaking.
I mean, the criticisms that women usually get, if they get a little bit mad or if they get a little bit this way or a little bit that way, it does not seem to be working with her. She seems to be able to be exactly who she is, which is a very tough former prosecutor, leader, and vice president.
Yeah, she's tough, but she's also compassionate. Look, I'm not surprised that the vice president and her campaign is doing so well and that people have really gravitated to her. I frankly think the people who are surprised, they haven't been paying as close of attention to the vice president over the last year and a half specifically. She's been traveling the country, having these conversations with folks, rallying the base, if you will. But also also reaching across the aisle and letting Republican women especially, know that there is a place for them in this movement that at the time, as she and President Biden were building together, now still the movement that she and now Governor Tim Walz are building and the vision that they have for the future. So look, I think she is somebody who is clear-eyed, who enjoys people, which is why if people think, oh, she looks like she's having a good time out there on the campaign trail, she enjoys campaigning. She likes being with people. She prefers to be out across the country, hearing what folks have to say, interacting with them directly, than being on a Zoom or just at the White House and hearing from other people what folks across the country are having to say. And I think that's important. And it's that perspective, frankly, of being able to listen to and hear from other people that she has really adeptly always brought back into the White House, and ensuring that those conversations that she's had with folks out there make their way back into the White House, back into the Oval Office with the president, and into the policies that they're putting forth. The thing about the protesters, I will say this, I've seen that look before that she gave. I don't think people should. I've seen a lot of reporting that reads into it as though, oh, you know, this is her first time being heckled by a protester, and this is juxtaposing her response with President Biden's response the last time he was heckled, that folks remember. And I would caution people to say this. I think what you saw from the vice president is kind of an exasperation and a slight frustration, because she did meet with the protesters, not those protesters, but folks from the uncommitted movement in Michigan prior to her rally. She has had a very clear record on this issue of speaking both to our support of Israel as the United States, but also understanding and highlighting the suffering of the people in Gaza. And you would have it believed from that interaction that we saw just in that rally that somehow Vice President Harris hasn't spoken at all to the plight of the Palestinian people. And I think that's what you were seeing from her in that moment. And frankly, it's going to be an issue that the campaign is going to have to confront going forward. Folks are going back onto college campuses in about 2 to 3 weeks. And this issue is still there. And I don't think it's something that she's going to shy away from. I actually think it's something she and her campaign are going to lean into, because they know that it's one of the things that needs to be addressed on the table.
Well, also what I saw in that moment, I thought it was the best thing, and the only thing she could do is, you know, two things can be true. There can be the Palestinian cause, and there can be need to defeat Donald Trump, and that's what we're here for right now. So if you want to continue, you can let Trump win, but we're here to defeat Donald Trump. That does not mean the Palestinian cause is not something that we need to absolutely talk about, and you've now proved it, that before that rally, she actually met with not those protesters. But so it really, everything needs context, but I thought it was the best she could do in that moment, and I liked it. Huma, there are a lot of accusations out there, lies that the Trump-Vance, I mean, we're used to this. There's so much disinformation spewing out of Donald Trump's side. Especially with your experience working for Hillary Clinton, how does the Harris campaign decide what to respond to and what to ignore when it comes to disinformation?
This is not an easy thing to answer, because I think that, you know, on the one hand, you are proactively sharing what your message is, what you're going to do for this country, staking our claim to the importance of democracy, fighting for our democracy, for freedom. But I think that we have graduated from the world where when you hear an accusation that is so outrageous and you think no one's going to believe this, you know, when Donald Trump suggested that President Obama was not American, he's now suggesting the vice president is all of a sudden black when she was brown before. He suggested that Hillary Clinton was crooked. And some of these things stick and some of them don't. I mean, some of them, you know, when you sit as a staff member on a campaign, as I have been, as Simone has been, as Psaki has been, and you say, well, no one's going to believe something so ludicrous or so ridiculous. And I think we're now at a point where, because of social media to some extent, people tend to believe crazy things all the time. And so I tend to believe that we should respond as much as we can. We don't live in the world of we should ignore it, no one's going to believe it. This is why visuals are so important. You know, the director of Advance always reported to me in most of our campaigns, and it's why the pictures, the images. I mean, Hillary is sick and has pneumonia and sort of is shaky getting into a car, and that visual was so devastating. People believed that she was dying based on that video showing over and over again. And so I think they're going to have to be very nimble. I'm sure their digital team is awake 24/7 because that's just the world we live in. Anything that suggests doubt or, you know, something that might be believable, you have to, I think, fight back on, clarify, and quickly bounce back as quickly as you can.
Yeah. I personally think disinformation should not be allowed in the debates, and that it should be upon the moderators and the networks and the producers in the control room to make sure that if one candidate or another spews disinformation, that they are stopped. Because, you know, it's gotten to the point where nobody knows what to believe anymore, and they cannot take that from important news organizations that, you know, that protect the truth as part of their job, that only report facts that are triple checked, that apologize if a fact has been gotten wrong. And if you allow someone to tromp all over your network and spew disinformation for 90 minutes, I'm not sure that's really, that to me seems to be something to be considered. Jen, about the debates. Trump is saying that he will only debate Harris if it's on Fox News. Do you think she should participate in a Fox debate if that's the only option with a live audience?
Yeah, first of all, just to echo what you just said, nobody should agree to any debate with Donald Trump where his microphones get cut off. I think that's a lesson learned. When he keeps talking and spewing absurdities, and also the moderators then are in a position to fact check him, which they should, or push back on him. Yes. That is what the public needs to see. He does it to himself. But on this question, she's done, in my view, exactly what she should do. But what she has also done so well during this campaign is be completely fearless. And she should be fearless in this case. I'm not suggesting agree on under no conditions. You agree under conditions where there isn't an audience, where his microphone is not going to be cut off. But here's what I will say about Fox. I did Fox News Sunday more than any other Sunday show when I was the White House press secretary. You watch Pete Buttigieg on Fox, they are not a big, scary monster you can't defeat. Right? You have some journalists there like Bret Baier and others who could be fine moderators, and go into the belly of the thing that Donald Trump is saying is his network and defeat him. She's still going to look younger, fiercer, smarter, better. So I would be for all fearlessly doing it with some conditions.
Yeah, I think a jeering audience is not okay. But otherwise,
no audience.
Would go wherever. That's the only thing. That does it for Morning Mika. This has been so fun. I love getting your insights on this new team, and onward. We'll see what happens. That does it for Morning Mika. We'll be back soon on YouTube and Peacock.